Hi, I'm Rowena, 66, mother of one. At least, that's what I used to believe. 2 days before my son's wedding, I was told, "We all agreed. You, Mom, are not welcome." No argument, no explanation. Just those exact words. Calm, practiced, like they'd been said many times before behind closed doors. They erased me from the guest list, the photos, even the memories. But what if I told you the real betrayal started long before that moment, when they rewrote my love as interference and turned my silence into guilt? Would you want to hear what happened next? The wind off the lake carried that soft floral scent that wedding venues love to pump into every corner, like manufactured joy. I stepped out of my car and pulled my jacket tight. I wasn't cold, just wary. Something about this day didn't sit right, and I hadn't even made it to the front door yet. The young woman at the check-in table blinked when I said my name. "Rowena Travers," I repeated, slow and clear. She scanned her list, frowned, then glanced at a second clipboard. "Oh, right. You're at table 7. It's labeled Family Friend." She smiled like it was no big deal. Family friend. I didn't say anything, just nodded and followed the path past manicured hedges and into the reception space. White roses spilled from tall vases, candles flickered like someone had scripted the lighting. I noticed how people grouped together in clusters, laughter swelling in places I didn't belong. Alaric stood with Isolde and Gideon in the far corner, deep in discussion. Isolde gestured with that crisp precision she used in her PR work, the kind that sliced through conversation like a scalpel. Gideon just nodded, hands folded behind his back like some elder statesman. Alaric didn't even glance up. I crossed the room alone. No one waved. No one even noticed. I reached table 7. The place card read Family Friend, neatly printed in soft gold calligraphy. There was no mistake. This wasn't a forgotten detail. It was intentional. I sat down slowly, my back straight, hands folded in my lap. They'd planned this. I scanned the room, trying to convince myself it didn't matter, but the weight in my chest made that impossible. You can't erase someone's name without trying to erase the person. Alaric finally approached, walking with the careful steps of someone about to deliver a rehearsed speech. He stopped in front of me, his face blank. "We all agreed. You, Mom, are not welcome at the wedding." It didn't hit me like a slap. It was worse. It was the hollow, measured sound of cement sealing a wall. Isolde stood just behind him, arms crossed, expression unreadable. I looked at my son. Really looked. His eyes didn't flinch. I didn't ask who "we" was. I didn't plead. I didn't cry. Something in me had gone still. Years of birthday parties I planned, hospital visits I sat through, tuition payments I made. It all lined up behind my silence like an army without weapons. Gideon joined them, resting a hand on Alaric's shoulder. That silent confirmation was all I needed. I stood. I didn't know what I was walking toward, just what I was walking away from. My feet carried me past the soft lighting and silent guests, out through the garden where roses bloomed too perfectly. I didn't trust anything that looked this flawless. Each step was measured, deliberate, not angry, not sad, just final. I reached my car and slid into the driver's seat. For a moment, I stared ahead, unsure whether to scream or laugh. I did neither. Instead, I whispered, barely loud enough for even me to hear. "So this is what it feels like to be voted out of your own bloodline." I didn't move for hours, just sat by the window as dusk settled into the corners of my house, soft and uninvited. The box sat on the table, still wrapped, still untouched. I had stitched those linens myself, every thread pulled tight with hope. An old habit of mine, one that used to mean something. I embroidered their initials, one corner at a time, humming the lullabies I once sang to Alaric when sleep came hard and peace came slow. 2 days had passed since the rehearsal, since the sentence. I didn't cry anymore. Not because I'd healed, because I couldn't afford to waste energy on salt and water. That seat, that label, That one line from his mouth. They were still playing on a loop in my head, like some cruel voicemail. My phone buzzed. Alaric's name lit up the screen, but the message was short. Cold. Mechanical. Please don't make this harder than it already is. That was it. No punctuation, no warmth, just a dismissal disguised as concern. I scrolled upward, through the history of our texts. Each message from me stretched out, filled with love and encouragement, memories he never acknowledged. His responses were brief, distant, almost scripted. That's when the doubt began to form. I opened my email, started comparing dates. Messages I remembered sending at midnight while crying into my tea. Gone. Others, misquoted. Sentences reworded to sound harsher, more controlling. It didn't make sense. Until it did. I grabbed the old shoebox from the closet, where I kept printed backups of everything I ever wrote to him during his college years. I compared the tone, the length, the intimacy. These new messages weren't from my son. Not really. They were crafted by someone else, or worse, altered. I called Mava. She picked up quickly, her voice soft. Ro? I didn't even greet her. Did Isolde ever say anything? About me? Mava hesitated, then said what I already suspected. She once told me she was working on limiting your influence, said you cloud his decisions. The breath caught in my chest. You think she… I think, Mava cut in, you need to get a copy of your phone records. And maybe, don't send anything else right now. I looked back at the box on the table. The ribbon had come slightly loose. I retied it. Not with a bow, just a firm knot. Then I pulled out a marker and wrote, slowly, across the top. For the truth, not the show. It wouldn't be opened by Isolde. Not if I could help it. But someday, Alaric might find it. When he was ready for something that wasn't filtered through curated perfection. I placed the box on the top shelf of my closet, high above reach, but not out of sight. I won't let my love be edited out, I said aloud, the words settling into the air like a quiet vow. The bank statements were neatly stacked on the kitchen table, each page whispering a memory I didn't realize I still carried. Tuition deposits, down payment on his first car, checks for security deposits. The line items didn't lie. I flipped through them like chapters of a book I had paid to publish but was no longer allowed to read. There were no thank you cards, no mentions in toasts or speeches, nothing. And I wasn't looking for applause. I never had. But silence this deliberate? That cut deeper. Somewhere between page 3 and page 4, I said it out loud for the first time. I was the invisible ATM. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside, the linen box in hand, its ribbon pulled taut again. I'd already written the label in my firmest handwriting, Alaric and Isolde. Underneath, smaller, I'd added, for the truth, not the show. The post office lobby was mostly quiet, one couple whispering near the passport line, a mother wrestling a toddler into submission with fruit snacks. I waited, then stepped forward when called. The clerk smiled, glancing at the name. That's a pretty label, she said. Special occasion? I stared at her for a beat too long before answering. It used to be. Back home, I sat in my living room, still in my coat. I dialed Mava again. This time, I didn't start with small talk. Do you think he ever truly understood what I gave up for him? Her pause was long enough that I imagined her closing her eyes on the other end. He might not want to, Ro, because if he did, he'd feel guilt, and guilt's messy at weddings. That landed somewhere between my lungs. Not quite a stab, but something dull and deep. It didn't draw blood, but it bruised. That night, I couldn't sleep. I took a pen and a yellow notepad from the kitchen drawer and started to write. Not a letter. A list. Stayed with his father 2 years longer than I should have. Paid off his student loans in secret. Covered his rent when he was between jobs and never asked for it back. Showed up to every showcase, even the ones he forgot to tell me about. The list went on. I lit a candle and set it beside the box, now resting on the kitchen table. The wax pooled slowly, soft light bouncing off the envelope I had sealed tight. I stared at it, not as a mother hoping for reconciliation, but as a woman tired of watching her sacrifices get shelved like outdated decorations. I gave you everything, I said. Not to the box. Not even to the room. Just to the memory of who he once was. My voice didn't break. My hands didn't shake. Then, softly, I whispered, I'll keep this, but I won't let it define me. The email invitation felt more like a reminder than a request. Join us for a special preview of the wedding slideshow, it read, in Isolde's carefully branded tone. I sat with it for hours before replying with a simple yes. I didn't want to go, but something told me I needed to see what version of Alaric's life would be presented to the world. 4 days before the wedding, I walked into the room at the venue where the screen was already glowing. Soft piano music played from a Bluetooth speaker perched on the windowsill. The wedding coordinator nodded at me with a tight-lipped smile. "Glad you could make it," she said, but didn't bother to hide the fact she hadn't expected me to. I took a seat in the second row, off to the side. The lights dimmed, and the first photo appeared. Alaric as a baby, swaddled in a hospital blanket. Alone. No arms holding him. No mother's hand brushing his cheek. The next. Alaric's 5th birthday. A backyard I recognized instantly, but cropped so tightly that you couldn't see the woman behind the cake. The one who baked it, frosted it, lit the candles. Me. Each image flicked by like a little erasure. Piano recital, middle school science fair, graduation, all carefully framed, all missing one thing. Me. I whispered, barely audible even to myself. I took most of these photos. No one looked over. They were too busy watching the spectacle of his life, neatly packaged and motherless. Then came the voice that broke me more than the pictures. A little girl, no older than 6, leaned toward her mother and pointed at a faded photo from a school play. "Is that your friend, or just a helper?" I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe, even. Isolde's voice floated forward from the row ahead, smooth and quick, like a PR rep diffusing a press question. "That's just someone who was there a lot," she said, brushing the girl's hair back with a fond smile. My grip on the armrest tightened. Not enough to snap it, just enough to steady myself against the kind of pain that makes your lungs ache without a sound. After the lights came back on, no one turned to me. No one asked my thoughts. I left without saying a word. By the time I got home, the sun had shifted. The light in my kitchen fell at a different angle, longer, quieter. I pulled down the photo albums from the top shelf of the pantry, not out of nostalgia, but necessity. Each page held a life I'd lived. Our life. Alaric's toothy grins, his scraped knees, his Halloween costumes I'd sewn by hand. Proof. Physical proof that I'd existed in his world, even if he now chose to edit me out of it. I slid one album aside and ran my hand over the worn cover. "If they're rewriting the past," I whispered, "I will protect what's real." The voicemail came early afternoon. I was sorting laundry, the mundane kind of task that keeps your hands busy while your mind spins its wheels. The wedding planner's voice was too cheerful for what she was about to say. "Hi, Rowena. Just a heads up. There's been a small adjustment to seating for the ceremony. Nothing major, just shifting some things for flow and access. Your new table is table 14, near the side entrance, just past the restrooms." Past the restrooms. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I opened the email that followed a few minutes later and clicked the updated chart. There it was, tucked away, like an afterthought, or a secret you didn't want to deal with. I stared at the layout until my eyes blurred, then picked up my phone and typed, "We need to talk before this goes too far." I didn't expect Alaric to call so quickly, but he did. His voice was distant, static, distracted, like he had one foot in another conversation. "Hey, what's going on?" "You tell me," I said, tone even. "You moved me behind the bathrooms. Is this Isolde's idea of honoring your mother? It's not like that. We just needed space. Alaric, I interrupted. Do you still want me there? He hesitated. It's complicated. I let the silence hang. You don't shrink people you care about. And if you let them shrink me like this, you'll regret the echo it leaves. He didn't respond. Maybe he didn't know how. I ended the call. I walked to the drawer where I kept old birthday cards and candle stubs, small things you don't throw away because they once mattered. Buried beneath them was the flash drive I'd used weeks ago. It held the video I'd recorded for the wedding, a message full of stories and grace. Love, even. I plugged it into the laptop. My face appeared, softer than I remembered. My voice, steady, full of warmth that hadn't yet been cauterized by what was coming. Alaric, you were never easy, I'd said on camera, but you were always mine. I hit pause. He never saw it. Claimed it didn't work. Claimed they didn't need it. I shut the laptop. Maybe they didn't, but I did. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, pen in hand, journal open. I wrote just one sentence. If I'm not welcomed, I won't enter quietly. I will return with proof. I folded the page, slipped it between two recipes I hadn't used in years, and went to bed. But not before I stood in front of the mirror. They can move my seat, I told my reflection, but I won't be easy to forget. The phone rang just after lunch. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, that old wound, still had a voice. The woman on the other end sounded chipper. Too chipper. Hi, Ms. Travers. Just confirming your honeymoon gift reservation has been successfully transferred. Mr. and Mrs. Stokes were so touched. What a generous gesture. My hand tightened around the receiver. I'm sorry, who? Mr. and Mrs. Gideon Stokes, she repeated. The reservation's under their name now. Bali, 5 nights. Oceanfront villa, it's all set. I didn't hang up. I simply placed the phone down, careful not to let it clatter. That reservation. It was mine. The gift I'd prepared for Alaric and Isolde. Quietly, deliberately. I booked it months ago, paid in full. Selected the suite myself, down to the welcome wine. And now it was branded as Gideon's Legacy. Of course it was. I walked to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and logged into the joint wedding fund account. I wanted to see the charges, trace the paper trail. My password failed. I tried another, then another, locked. I clicked Forgot Password and typed in my email. No match. I called the bank, spoke to a rep who barely concealed his confusion. You're not listed as an account holder, he said. Only Mr. Stokes. My mouth stayed closed longer than it should have. When I spoke, my voice surprised even me. Thank you, I said. That's all I needed. I spent the rest of the afternoon in my study. I didn't cry. I printed everything. Airline confirmations, the resort invoice, screenshots of email threads, every dollar I gave, every cent I covered, every transfer I made. I arranged them in order, slid them into a folder labeled When Truth is Needed. Then I made a copy. That one went into a small fireproof box I'd kept in the back of my closet since Alaric was 12. The place where I used to store his report cards and drawings. Things that mattered. I sat for a long time after that. The room didn't feel angry, it felt empty. But I wasn't. If I must, I said aloud, I will defend my legacy with proof, not pity. There was still time before dark, so I walked to the drawer where I kept stationery. I chose a card without a name. Not for Alaric, not even for Isolde. Just a message. You turned me into a spectator. I'm choosing to become a witness. I sealed it, left it blank, slipped it between the pages of the wedding program that arrived in the mail just last week. And I whispered again, steady now. I am choosing to become a witness. I arrived early, not by accident, but by design. The parking lot was mostly empty, shadows of staff moving through the tall windows of the venue. I stayed in my car, watching the sun crawl higher across the windshield. When I finally stepped out, it wasn't nerves I felt. It was calculation. Inside, a pair of staff members stood near the floral arch, whispering. I caught just enough. Bride said keep her calm. You know her condition. Condition? I approached, steady. They froze. Excuse me, I said. One fumbled a clipboard. Oh, sorry. We didn't realize. I smiled, sharp and cold. That's all right. But next time you're spreading rumors, at least make sure they're based on real files. I didn't wait for a response. I already knew where it came from. Back outside, I stayed close enough to hear, but far enough to disappear. The chapel doors opened. Guests were ushered in with hushed instructions and delicate smiles. Then Gideon appeared. He walked Alaric down the aisle, arm in arm, as if the last 30 years belonged to him. The officiant's voice rang out clear and certain. Today we honor the man who raised him. The crowd clapped. I didn't. I watched. From a distance, unnoticed, but not unknowing. I didn't flinch when they said Gideon's name. I didn't blink when Alaric smiled toward the crowd. I simply curled my fingers into my palms, anchoring myself in silence that was anything but passive. Later, in my car, I replayed the video, my video. The one that was supposed to air, my voice, calm, my face, soft. Words full of hope that had no audience. Then, I opened a second file. Audio I had recorded the day before, tucked in my purse. It captured the conversation with the wedding planner. Yes, the bride said to downplay her involvement. She's been difficult. I bundled both into a folder, labeled it Truth, and attached it to an email from Ava. No commentary, just 2 lines. Hold this. It's time I let the story tell itself. I didn't hit send yet. Instead, I drove to the end of the block and parked again. Just far enough that no one would notice me. I looked back at the venue, polished, prepared, perfect. I didn't hate it. I didn't envy it. I just saw it for what it was. A set. You staged a story, I said to the building, but I kept the truth in high definition. The message from Mava came in seconds later. We're with you, and so is the truth. Mava's text came just as the string quartet finished their final set. They're cueing the slideshow, be ready. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The USB drive was already in my hand, warm from being clutched too tightly. I stepped inside, past the tables and centerpieces, past the glances that slid off me like I wasn't quite meant to be there. The AV technician looked up. I held out the drive. Play this when my name comes up. Not before, not after. He blinked. I think they already have something. I'm not asking. He took it. And for a moment, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. Not fear, not guilt, just confusion about where this woman had come from. The room buzzed with celebration. Guests sipped champagne, laughed into napkins. At the front, Gideon stood, a microphone in hand, beaming. Let's take a moment to appreciate the one who made all this possible, he said. My daughter-in-law, Isolde. She's united generations today. Applause erupted. Alaric stood beside him, nodding, smiling. I watched him carefully, trying to see if he flinched. He didn't. The lights dimmed. The screen lit up. The montage began like any other. Childhood photos, milestone moments, a curated collection of life. Then it paused, and something shifted. My voice came through the speakers. Alaric, you were always stubborn, it began, and brave, and mine. Gasps echoed. Faces turned. Some smiled. Some froze. Then the audio changed. A new voice, one not meant for a microphone. Yes, we agreed to exclude her. Isolde wanted it clean. It was the wedding planner. Then a silence thicker than any music break. I stood near the back. I didn't gloat. I didn't speak. I just stood there, finally visible. Mava walked forward, phone in hand. This, she said, is Isolde's voice. This was never meant to be heard. Isolde stood quickly, whispering to someone beside her. Her face tightened. Mava played the clip anyway. I just needed her out. She complicates things. She makes him think. The room fell into itself. Alaric didn't move. Gideon's smile faded. And for once, I didn't have to defend myself. The morning light spilled into the kitchen, softer than usual. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the weight of waking. I sat at the table, fingers curled around a mug of black coffee, eyes fixed on a photo I had found tucked behind a drawer weeks earlier. Me, holding baby Alaric on his first day of preschool, his tiny hand gripping the edge of my collar. My handwriting on the back said simply, Day 1. It sat in a new frame now. Not ornate, just solid. Something meant to last. Maeva arrived before noon. She knocked once, then let herself in like she always used to. Her hug didn't need words. She placed a flash drive on the counter. You should know, she said, pouring herself some coffee. People don't unhear truth. It echoes. Might take time, but it lingers. I nodded. No triumphant smirk, no bitterness, just a kind of stillness that comes when the dust finally settles, and you're left standing among things that mattered and things that didn't. Later that afternoon, a text came through. I didn't know. I'm sorry. Alaric. There was no call, no voice, just those 6 words glowing on my screen like they cost him everything to send. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because I knew that apology wasn't meant for fixing. It was a release. His, not mine. I opened a new message, typed out, Some truths don't need to be explained, only honored. But I didn't send it. Instead, I closed the app, walked to the hallway closet, and pulled out the folder I had named For Me. Inside were receipts, copies of bank statements, screenshots, timelines, proof of everything I had done, everything I had given. I filed it neatly back into place. In the evening, Maeva and I sat at a quiet cafe near the edge of town. We spoke of small things. Her garden, an article she read, a memory about our mother that made us both smile. You did what you came to do, she said at one point. I nodded. And what I didn't come to do, I left undone. That's peace, too. We didn't talk about Isolde, or Gideon, or the guests who'd clapped for a lie and then sat frozen in the truth. Some things don't need repeating once they've been heard, right? Before bed, I placed the photo of Alaric and me on the nightstand. I looked at it for a long while and whispered, I walked through fire without a flame touching me. I walked out carrying the truth. That is enough. Sometimes surviving isn't loud. It's not fireworks or grand speeches. Sometimes surviving looks like sitting with a cup of coffee, staring at a photograph that only you remember the weight of. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about reclaiming your place, even when others try to write you out of the script. If you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own family, I want you to know. Your truth matters. You don't need permission to remember, to feel, to stand firm. And you certainly don't need to shrink so others can stretch. What about you? Have you ever been sidelined in a story you helped build? I'd love to hear your experiences. If this story touched you, comment 1 below, or share where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate, tell me why. Every voice matters here. If you believe in stories that heal, empower, and speak the quiet truths, subscribe now. More are coming. Let's walk through them together.